All right, so how do we know if we scored our bread very nicely? Well, this is a perfectly scored loaf. You can tell because it has opened up very nice and even, is scored from end to end. This is that ear that I'm talking about, and you can tell that it's really nicely pulling away and has a large gap here. So this is a very clean cut and a very nicely scored loaf. Now, I've got a number of examples of incorrectly scored bread that we're going to compare it to. Okay, so here I've got a loaf of bread that we just didn't score, okay? You can see that what happens when you don't score it is that the bread finds the weakest point at which you've got your gluten structure and bursts there. So this is kind of called a blowout. You can also see that the rest of the loaf, in comparison, did not get nearly as wide or as open, and it's just generally unattractive. Okay, so this one we just did not score. Next, this one we didn't score from end to end. So you can see that the very ends here are very tight and it just didn't open up nearly as much. We don't have as much volume. Okay, so this one is an example of not scoring it all the way. So remember, especially for a batard, you want it to go all the way across from end to end. Okay, next we're talking about our blade angle here. This one, a bit too sharp of an angle. What happens is when you come at it very sharply like this, like really very flat against the loaf when you're cutting it, it's got too much dough to try to lift up. And what happens is that it just doesn't ever really get there. So it tries to go up and out, and then it kind of collapses back on top of itself. So you want to make sure that you're going at it at that 22-degree angle, just slightly off center, okay? So next is our opposite blade angle. So this one is scored just straight up and down. Okay, so you can see it's still getting more volume, but it's starting to open up from the side here. It's starting to open up from the side here. So it doesn't really know which way it wants to go. It's just going up and kind of out instead of, in this fashion, kind of opening up and blooming very, very nicely. So if you see kind of two gaps like this, what that means is that you've cut it straight up and down, so the air and the gas is all escaping out this way, okay? Now, lastly, what I've got is that if the bread is scored too deeply, okay? So you can see here that when we cut it, again, it's kind of like the same as the angle. It's got too much too much dough to try to lift. Okay, so this tried to be an ear. It's still quite dense. So this is cut too deeply, and you can see this is very thick. It didn't rise nearly as nicely as in comparison to our perfect loaf. Okay, so these are some really kind of clear examples of very good versus your common mistakes here.